Sorry to be the person between you and lunch, but we promise to make it entertaining here and hopefully give some food for thought. I'll just start out with a quick introduction. I'm Dharmesh, Thakker. I run cloud and big data investments for Intel Capital. We're also the venture arm of Intel Corporation. We invest about $300 to $500 million every year. So very active financial and strategic investor. And I've had the fortune of being on both sides of the spectrum as it relates to big data. I see a lot of familiar faces from my portfolio. So invested in Cloudera, MongoDB, Blue Data, and some others on the core infrastructure side. And also on the application side, invested in companies like Reflection, which is in the e-commerce analytics space, Indica, as well as Huawei's Analytics and others. And I think it's a very timely panel to talk about big data, because there's a lot of folks that are trying to put the infrastructure in place, which is all great. But I think the real opportunity is also in extracting value out of the data that you already have. And I think we have a fantastic set of people here that can talk about the pain point from a business standpoint at Mindjet, and a potential solution as a looker. And with that, I'll hand over to Gurgana to do a quick intro and get into the Q&A.
So my name is Anna, and my background is in statistics. I got my PhD at GW a couple years ago, and then came out to the Bay Area because I heard there was all this data out here, and I thought they could use my skills. So I was hired at Mindjet. Mindjet is a 15-year-old software company. Originally, we sold desktop software, but about 2 years ago became more of a cloud startup. So we offered a cloud solution. It was a project management solution, and suddenly they had so much data and they didn't know what to do with it, so they hired me. And when I got to Mindjet, I found so much data and so many different siloed data sources that I wanted to analyze, and I had a very hard time mapping it all together. And so that was really my big pain point, but it was from NetSuite to Salesforce data, and then in-product data, and so I was tasked with bringing all that data together and then reporting on it.
Frank, did you want to do a quick intro as well?
Yeah, real quick. So again, I'm Frank Bien. I'm the CEO of Looker. We're a little bit different of a software company. We're actually based down in Santa Cruz. So I worked actually with some of you back in the late 90s, and really started to get into the software thing kind of as the web was taking off originally. And right after 9/11, moved over into this data space and was at a company that was doing some of the early MPP scale-out databases for call detail record analysis and those kind of Snowden sorts of things. But then sort of saw the shift in analytics and how this event machine-generated data could be used for other purposes, for marketing, for sales optimization, for those kinds of things. And went over pretty early to a little company called Green Plum, which later EMC acquired and sort of turned into this pivotal thing. I joined Looker a little over a year ago. Looker's only about 2 years old now. And we're really kind of taking a different approach to this bring value out of data. And I can kind of go through this as we talk today, but it's really all about extracting value out of really large, complex, and highly faceted data environments.
Got it. That's perfect. Thanks for the introduction, guys. So before I begin in the Q&A, one thing I hear a lot, having been involved with a number of our CIOs, the CMOs, at a number of large organizations, from Goldman to Nike to Macy's and others, there's this data lake problem where people now have tons of data lakes. They have tons of clusters of, name your big data infrastructure technology. But I think there's a lot of the internal IT folks that are now trying to bubble this up and say, how do I improve conversion on Nike.com, or how do I get my hedge fund manager to extract weather data and make better decisions in investing? But there's a widespread recognition internally, leading to a lot of pressure internally on how to extract that business value from data that has been stored, the unstructured data that has been stored for the last couple of years. I'm just curious, Anna, from your perspective, what was the pain point and the urgency to start looking for new solutions at Mindjet?
Yeah, so...
what were you using, perhaps, if you can talk about that as well?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, when I got there, the data was we had so much data in multiple siloed data sources. And so what I did was I brought it all together into a Microsoft SQL server where I could look at all the together, but that ended up being very manual. It took a long time to write the queries that I wanted, and then to report on it, I was just exporting the data into Excel and building graphs. And so this was a very manual process. I would spend an entire day every week just building a simple weekly report for the marketing and sales managers. So I really wanted a tool that could sit on top of the SQL database the warehouse that we put together, to one, automate the report, and also to enable other business users to sort of dig down into the data and do their own data discovery. We had one tool. It was, I think it's an older Jaspersoft reporting tool, which we could build the automated reports, but it didn't enable the drill down ability that Looker did. So we didn't want to go with that. And then I tried Tableau, and Tableau had very nice visualizations, but not as much flexibility with the underlying data model. So that is why we chose Looker. Also, we needed a tool that sat inside of the firewall on top of the database, because we have data that can't get out. It's sensitive data, and so we didn't want to send it to a cloud solution.
But if I may, if you even up-level that one layer, were the business constituents pushing for opportunities you were missing on that drove you to look for better, faster solution? And just characterize that a bit. What were the business opportunities that were driving this evaluation in the first place?
Well, it started really with just my time. I was spending so much time on fairly simple reports that didn't really make sense. So we started looking because of that to automate these reports that were being consumed all across the company. But then people, I think with my being there as the first data scientist, people started to become more data oriented and thinking about the data and making decisions because of data. And the more I produced, the more they wanted. And so it really made sense for them to have their own tool to dig down into the data themselves.
Okay. Frank, from your perspective, given that you've been a part of the Green Plum team, kind of selling solutions to that audience, and now with Looker, maybe you can characterize at a broad level, what are the trigger points for some of your customers? You said 100 customers or so. What are the trigger points, and who is the typical audience sponsoring a solution like Looker?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think you kind of touched on it here. I think what we see pretty regularly, and what I saw, as we were deploying this big data, I think to use that term even, infrastructure, was that people were just grabbing data, right? They were no longer putting in these formal star schemas, and they were just sort of mirroring transaction schemas over into big databases. And then they'd load, MuleSoft or SnapLogic or something, and start sucking over all the API data out of Salesforce and Marketo and all this kind of stuff. And they started to create big, complicated things that were also pretty fast to query. But then we would go out and talk to customers, and Anna's a PhD data scientist, right? And she's creating reports, when we met. And you scratch your head and you're thinking, why is this so? We focus so much on this data infrastructure component, where to put all the data and scale it out and all this kind of stuff. And we focused a lot on self-service tools and how when we have a data set, we can then visualize it and do some basic exploration within that data set. But fundamentally, this notion of data pools is not solved. It's the notion of, how do I explore really large, hundreds of terabytes of data, and then, find this data that I'm interested in and actually do some kind of visualization and things like that. And, we see a lot of work going on with really interesting companies like Trifacta and Tamron and things here today, on kind of munging this data together. But fundamentally, we're collecting lots of data, and we have to provide this veneer on top to bring it the last mile of value. So I think when we're talking to customers, what's resonating is this notion of, how do we finally get value, from a business user perspective on this really core data set.
Got it. So I think it would be almost like an app server on top of the data lakes that exist. So maybe you have a couple of examples you can talk about of a killer app that was just not possible before the customer looked at, started using Looker, kind of the before and after impact, perhaps. Maybe you can do that, Frank, and then Anna can talk about it.
And has some great examples. A good one that comes to mind is a company just down the street, a Hotel Tonight, right? And Hotel Tonight, obviously, many of you, anyone actually use Hotel Tonight? It's a great app, you should. I think it's the #1 booking app for hotels now in the United States, and they do same-day hotel bookings. And what you see with Looker first is that people start interacting with data in a new way, and Looker is completely web-based, and that's It's weird that I would even say that today, but in the BI world, a lot of things still aren't web-based. So what you see is URLs getting passed around in email, and it's like, hey, I think we should look at the New York market. And this is what was happening there. And someone says, no, that's not right. Let's look over here. And this email starts flowing around with links to data, and everywhere it's click and then drill into data. And what often happens is organizations start to use data in a new way. So in the case of Hotel Tonight, there was a person in New York who was sort of managing the New York market, and they saw that a data analyst had kind of built up a new measure of some view of what a booking was. And then, on the flip side, once they started using that, the people doing, referral marketing at headquarters started to see the same thing, right? So like, this is interesting. Some emails flow back and forth. And the next thing you know, the person in referral marketing, who had no idea that this, was even needed, this booking kind of measure, started to put these two things together. And this is really highly faceted data that's coming from completely different data sources.
Yeah.
And what they started to see was a heat map, and they started to see that, obviously people who were using the service a lot were also referring customers, and that makes sense, and we expect that to happen. But they also saw that people who were never referring customers, right, were also booking a lot, or referring people to book. And immediately you think fraud, right? This has to be a fraud issue. And it turned out it wasn't that at all. And in an environment like Looker, where it's an app server on top of data, you're clicking through to real level detail. And what they quickly saw was there was, flight attendants and waitresses and things like that referring people over, because you'd get to a town and maybe you'd have too much to drink or who knows what, right? And you would need a place to stay. And that was suddenly this new market that they could go after and they could start to target from a referral marketing perspective. And that starts to be really game-changing kinds of things.
Got it. And Anna, from your perspective, if you look at Mindjet, there's obviously the efficiency element, the amount of time it takes for data scientists to do all the necessary evil of prepping and cleansing the data, which is all great. But as you did that, and now presumably as you can run more experiments through the data because it's more efficient, were there a couple of examples of the aha moment saying, hey, I found this insight I could have never thought about before? And again, as a follow-on, has it now been put in production? Because data scientists can discover insights for so long, but ultimately there's probably 100 business analysts for every one of you. Is it being used in production?
Yeah, one of my favorite examples is, so Looker has, one of the analysts at Looker built an R plugin to Looker, so R is statistical software, which I used in grad school, so I really like using R. So I was able to pump data from Looker into R. I ran a logistic regression analysis on trialist activity data and connected that with whether they, historically, whether the trialists had purchased or not. And so I developed a model that predicted the propensity of the trialist to purchase. I then took that model, programmed it back into Looker. Looker has the ability to actually work with the language of the underlying model, so you can build out models however you want. So I actually built this model into my Looker instance, and now the sales team uses it to rank leads. And they have found that 5 times as many leads convert than had previously before I used this model.
Awesome. That's good. Very helpful. And the audience, has it been used mostly by a data scientist audience, or is it the business analysts as well that are using it?
So we have 3 data scientists, 1 financial analyst, using it every single day, building out the models and doing really deep data discovery. And then we have a handful of other business analysts who will dig through the data, but they're not necessarily working with the underlying models.
Got it. Yeah, Frank, from your perspective, this is a somewhat noisy space. Probably have a big data index of the number of companies that are trying to get business value out of data silos. Who do you kind of position yourselves relative to, and what elements of the message resonate with customers and kind of give you the competitive edge?
Yeah, it's funny, when we go out and talk to customers, they have 1 of 2 reactions. And in the traditional BI space, they usually say, you guys are freaking crazy, this will never work, you're idiots, right? And they start with that. That's happening less and less, thank goodness. And I think what you see is then the folks who are kind of onto extracting value out of this new data world say, no, this is how the architecture is working. You have these big scale-out machines, you can't be moving data around all the time. You need to put more of an application server idea on top of it, right? And then extract value without moving data around, because data has weight, you can't just be moving it around all the time. And I think what resonates with customers is the notion of the simple stack, it's connect, describe, explore. And what organizations are lacking is this ability to describe their data. I mean, we're back to these ideas of modeling and semantic layer, and I think that no one took another bite out of that apple. It really became very stale, and what Looker has done is sort of brought this up in a new way. So, what customers are resonating, I think where we really differentiate is the ability to describe data in a highly reusable way. This is very, highly faceted, complex data, and then allow data analysts to provide these curated experiences for end users to then explore the data. In every case, the value of Looker is to end business users, but it's as curated by data analysts. So we really run into this innovation cycle between the data analyst and their end user population. And we find that the data analyst can finally be leveraged, right? Because these are hard people to go out and find. So I think we play with the core players in that space. It's interesting, if BI is a $20 billion market and, the new players are about $2 billion of it, there's still $18 billion of market share to go get. And I think that, what was left behind as we all charged off into this, big data thing and the predictive analytics thing was, who's minding the store on core business data? How do I control my inventory? How do I understand lifetime value? How do I do those things, right? And that's really where Looker is aimed, and that might be more where Bob J and Cognos.
Is that the right way to look at the market? I mean, is it really the existing BI market where there's better, faster, cheaper ways to extract value, or is it net new type of analytics and expand the pie?
I think BI is all about expanding the pie, right? I mean, this whole data world is all about expanding the pie. I think what you typically see is a lot less rip and replace and a lot of new project kind of thing. When you look at the growth of things like Redshift and tools to go on top of Redshift, I mean, that's a whole net new thing going on right now, new projects.
Got it. So how far up the stack do you go? So I think, having looked at the space the last 3 years, you first see a lot of people saying, well, there's a better data structure, a better virtualization structure, that's great. Now we say, well, let me get dashboards and reports out of it, that's great. There's a ton of data. I talked to a large telco that said 15 billion data points in the network every day, relative to 50 million records in my Oracle database. So there's a lot of, the volume of data itself is mind-boggling, but it's still pretty much at the reports, dashboard level. And now we're going up the stack saying, okay, let me make the querying interactive so I can get more insights faster. And how far up the stack do you go? Do you get to a point where there's advanced machine learning that can make decisions on the fly as well? I mean, as opposed to extracting data, and then looking for insights and then productizing it. Are there advanced rules engines that can trigger more marketing on the fly? And how up the stack can you go?
Yeah, no, I think Looker fundamentally is an application server. So it has a full API set that allows data, once it's represented, to be accessed by other applications. So Anna gave a great example of R, but there would be many others. So when you go to Looker, and the organization has been explained in LookML, which is our modeling environment, you start to see the official source of truth again. You start to see, Gartner talked a lot about it in their Magic Quadrant, this governed data discovery. Well, how do you know that when I'm asking what lifetime value is, or what customer booking is, or even if it is a customer, or lifetime value is net of returns, or those kinds of things, I need to ensure that when I ask a question, I get back the right answer. And that includes not just people in the data discovery application, but it absolutely includes other applications. It could be dynamic pricing engines. It could be whatever. It could be other spreadsheets that are populated from this application server. So I think what you see from an integration perspective is Looker serve up the data into those other kinds of tools. Things like R, other environments like that.
Yeah. What do you think, Anna? There are opportunities. Once a data science problem of finding insights faster is kind of been checked off, are there opportunities where there's real-time decisioning engines or what have you that you can move up the stack, or is that 10 years away still?
It's hard to say. That's definitely what I'm most interested in. With my statistical background, I really like machine learning and statistical model building part of the job. But up until this point, in my personal experience, it was hard to just get the dynamic automated reports out to the end users. And so now that we've nailed that, definitely focusing on.
Yeah, because it's mind-boggling in some sense. I'll use another example as well. So I look at LinkedIn. I'm pretty close with a number of the folks over there, and they have 200+ million members that are connected in multiple ways. There's a wealth of data in there, right? And still, there's basic products in terms of people who know or recruiting solutions, and I'm sure there's a ton of advanced analytics in there, but it still seems like it's 5 years away, and I still felt the same way 3 years ago as well. So it just seems like It's out there, and I don't know if it's the rate at which you can extract insights that is the gate, or whether it's just the cultural, the notion of uncovering insights, productizing them for business analysts to run dashboards, as opposed to, making real-time decisions. Wouldn't it be cool? You go to LinkedIn to apply for a job because somebody pinged you, but knowing your background, knowing how 50 other people have applied for similar jobs and what the hit rate is, it would actually recommend you a different job to apply to, for example. Or we have a portfolio company that is used by some very large e-commerce vendors where they say, not only will I figure out what metrics make the user click, but I'll actually personalize the entire experience from the front page to the search to the recommendations based on exactly who you are, what device you're on. And that's one out of a few examples, but I'm just wondering whether once you solve the data science problem, can you get to that automated decisioning process?
It was interesting. This topic came up last week. I was giving a talk, and someone said, "What's an aha moment with Looker?" And I think what we constantly see, in the customer base, like you said, we're passing on our customers now, so there's a bit of folks who we've run into already. And what they say is, Looker was finally the thing that allowed me as a data scientist or a data analyst to go do those things. Because what you see time and time again is the data analysts, the data scientists, these people are back to providing data polls or writing SQL queries, or there's no end to going into organizations where they're facing these problems. And what we are pretty consistently seeing is, boy, this was the thing that finally allowed me to go do more important things, right? To get all this stuff off my plate.
Got it. I don't know if you have any time for question Q&A in the audience, but just any finishing thoughts for the audience, and in your mind, what do you think is the holy grail of big data 5 years from now, perhaps? If you guys want to share your thoughts, perhaps, on that?
Certainly more machine learning and statistical modeling.
Got it. Okay. What's your friend?
I think customers getting value. I think that's still the thing that's missing. I think there's niche cases. There's really famous cases with famous big internet companies and things like that. But for real organizations to get value out of big data, like people do out of things like Tableau, really that notion of real value.
I agree. No, I agree absolutely. Focusing on business value is certainly a good starting point. And yeah, and you kind of develop your own pattern recognition. We probably talk to 300 to 400 companies every year in the context of looking at investment pitches, and everybody gets fascinated with, look at the gigabytes and petabytes of data we have, and now, hey, there's another V, there's a variety, and there's a velocity, and that's great. But if you look at the business value that is coming out of this data, it's probably still in the beginning stages of a 10-year cycle. And just to put things in perspective, there's a variety of industries, and if you look at US GDP is like 13, 14 trillion, and if there's a way to make industries 1% more efficient in manufacturing or healthcare or finance, leveraging data and leveraging real-time intelligence, that by itself is going to be a massive opportunity, and I think we're just in the beginning stages of that. So, great job, companies like Looker that are uncovering the data and letting the next set of opportunities be possible. So, with that, I'll just wrap the conversation. You can follow up with the panelists here. Any other questions? Offline. Thank you. Let's go back to lunch.